Have you ever stumbled across a story online that felt too disturbing to be fiction? That's what Creepypasta is. These are short horror stories, born on the internet, shared and reshared like digital campfire tales. They spread in whispers across forums and late-night message boards, designed to make you question what's real and what isn't. Some are eerie, like lost episodes of children's shows that never should have existed. Others are terrifying figures, faceless men in the woods, killers who smile in the dark. But among them all, one stands above the rest. A story so unnerving, so grotesque, it blurs the line between horror fiction and a nightmare you can't wake up from. It's called the Russian sleep experiment. And once you hear it, you'll understand why so many call it the most terrifying creepypasta ever written. In the late 1940s, Russian researchers conducted an experiment that was meant to change the boundaries of science forever. They took 5 political prisoners, enemies of the state captured during the war, and offered them a bargain. If they submitted to a test and avoided sleep for 30 days, they would earn their freedom. It was a lie, but the subjects didn't know that. The experiment required them to remain awake inside a sealed environment, while a gas-based stimulant was pumped in continuously. The scientists monitored their oxygen intake carefully, since the gas itself could become toxic at high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras. The researchers had only microphones and thick glass porthole windows to observe their subjects. The chamber itself contained books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water, a toilet, and enough dried food to last them more than a month. At first, everything was fine. For the first 5 days, the prisoners hardly complained. They kept their word and avoided sleep, speaking freely with each other. But by the 4th day, their conversations had turned dark. They began recounting traumatic experiences, dwelling on painful memories, circling endlessly around guilt and fear. By the 5th day, paranoia had set in. They no longer spoke openly with each other. Instead, they began whispering into the microphones and the mirrored portholes, as if trying to curry favour with the researchers by betraying their comrades. The scientists initially suspected this paranoia was an effect of the gas, but by the 9th day, something far stranger occurred. One of the subjects began screaming. He ran up and down the length of the chamber for hours, screaming until his vocal cords tore, leaving him only able to squeak. What disturbed the scientists most was the reaction of the others. They didn't react at all. They simply continued their whispering. Then another began screaming. 2 others dismantled the books, smeared the pages with their own excrement, and calmly plastered them over the portholes. The screaming stopped. The whispering stopped. 3 more days passed in total silence. The researchers grew nervous, checking the microphones every hour. It seemed impossible that 5 living people could remain so quiet, yet the oxygen consumption in the chamber told another story. The subjects were alive, and their intake was so high it suggested they were engaged in strenuous exercise. On the 14th day, desperate for a response, the researchers used the intercom. They spoke into the chamber. "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." At first, silence. Then a calm voice replied, "We no longer want to be freed." The researchers and the military debated fiercely, but finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. They flushed out the stimulant gas, replaced it with fresh air. Immediately, voices from inside began to cry, begging and pleading for the gas to be turned back on. When the chamber was opened and soldiers entered, what they saw drove them to scream louder than the prisoners themselves. 4 subjects were still alive, but their condition was worse than death. The untouched food supplies sat rotting in the corner. The body of the 5th subject was mutilated beyond recognition, his flesh stuffed into the floor drain, clogging it and allowing several inches of bloody water to pool across the floor. The surviving 4 had torn themselves apart. Strips of muscle and skin were ripped from their bodies. Their fingertips were worn down to exposed bone. The wounds were not caused by teeth, as first suspected, but by their own hands. Their abdomens had been ripped open, organs removed and placed carefully on the floor, still connected, still functioning. The researchers realized with horror that the digestive systems were still working, and they were digesting their own flesh. When soldiers attempted to remove the survivors, the subjects fought back with an inhuman rage. One soldier had his throat ripped out. Another suffered wounds so brutal, he bled to death almost immediately. 5 more soldiers would later lose their lives. Some by suicide, unable to endure what they had seen. One of the test subjects had his spleen ruptured and quickly bled out, but even after losing almost all his blood, he fought like a wild animal, breaking the ribs and arms of a doctor. His heart continued beating for 2 full minutes after his body had bled dry. Even then, he continued to scream the word "more" again and again, weaker each time, until at last he was silent. The 3 survivors were taken to a medical facility for study. The most injured resisted sedation. Even doses 10 times greater than normal failed to calm him. When he was finally subdued with anesthesia, his heart stopped instantly. An autopsy revealed blood 3 times more oxygenated than normal. His muscles were shredded, his bones fractured, not from blows but from the force of his own contractions. The second survivor was the first to have screamed. With destroyed vocal cords, he could no longer speak, but when anaesthetic gas was brought near him, he shook his head violently in refusal. When someone suggested surgery without anaesthetic, he nodded eagerly. For 6 hours, doctors replaced his organs, sewing his body back together while he remained awake. Throughout, he stared at a nurse and smiled. When finally handed a pen and paper, he scrawled 2 words: "Keep cutting." The remaining 2 subjects were given surgery as well. They laughed uncontrollably during the operations. When paralysed, their eyes tracked the researchers, still begging for the return of the gas. When asked why they had mutilated themselves, why they had begged for the gas, the answer was always the same: we must remain awake. The military demanded the experiment continue. The subjects were strapped down, connected to EEG monitors, and prepared to be returned to the chamber. The moment they heard they would be put back on the gas, they stopped struggling. One hummed softly, endlessly. Another blinked rapidly, straining to stay awake. One subject's brain waves flatlined over and over, as if he was suffering repeated bouts of brain death before recovering. Finally, his eyes closed. His heart stopped. His EEG flatlined permanently. The last surviving subject screamed, demanding to be sealed in immediately. The commander gave the order to return him to the chamber. But before it could happen, one of the researchers drew his gun. He shot the commander point blank in the head. Then he turned and shot the mute subject dead. The room erupted into chaos as staff fled. The armed researcher aimed at the final prisoner, strapped to the bed. "I won't be locked in here with these things," he shouted. "Not with you." "Tell me, what are you?" The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher hesitated. Then he aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the prisoner weakly choked out, "So nearly free." So that's it. Please let me know which other creepypasta you want me to loop up. I am excited for the nightmares for the sake of your entertainment. Please like and subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Until next time. Take care